Hello everyone and welcome to Global Azure 2024. I still have a tendency to call it Global Azure Bootcamp because that's how it was called in the beginning. Anyway, Global Azure is a worldwide community event focused on learning and sharing knowledge about Microsoft Azure, obviously. And it's an excellent platform for all of us to learn and grow our cloud knowledge together. So make sure you check other sessions that are part of Gimme Cloud Talks, a community event organized by my friend Dwayne Netwick, and also check other global events around the world. Thanks for joining today's session. It's going to be about Azure migration strategies. My name is Vukašin Terzić. I currently work as a senior cloud architect at Protera, and I specialized in cloud architecture and migration strategies. I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP, and here are some ways how you can get in touch with me, so feel free to reach out. I look forward to sharing some insights and best practices with you today. So, as I said, this session is going to be about migrations. And when we decide to migrate to Azure, we have several options to achieve that. And each is different in its approach and outcomes that comes out of it. They range from straightforward copying existing files to Azure, all the way to completely rewriting our applications to be cloud native from the very beginning. And to be able to choose the right migration strategy, we need to understand the requirements and advantages of these. So let's take a quick look at that. So first option that you can see here, it's called rehost, and it's the simplest migration strategy, and we often refer to it as a lift and shift to cloud. This is simply moving existing applications to Azure without making changes to the application's architecture. It's like picking up server from your on-prem data center and dropping it into cloud. This method is popular because it's fast, and of course, it's not always as simple as that. You need to build your Azure environment first, you connect networks and so on. However, while it gets you to the cloud quickly, it's not going to allow you to fully take advantage of cloud native features such as, dynamic scaling, managed services, and so on. And organizations often use this strategy as a first step, and they plan to optimize later. Other option we have is called refactoring. This approach involves making like a minor modifications to the application to start using some of those cloud native capabilities, but does not involve changing the core architecture of the application. So, for example, you might modify your application to use some kind of like a SQL or like a database service in Azure instead of using your like SQL or database service that is installed within your OS. The fundamental architecture still stays the same. You are using the same technologies, and instead of running, for example, SQL Server installed inside of your Windows server, you will run it in a platform service. This approach will let you immediately see the benefits from the cloud without significant upfront investment or in rewriting your application. And this method or this approach called replatforming is the one that I will talk about later in this session. The next one we have here, it's called re-architect or redesign your application. Here we are making significant changes to the application code and architecture to optimize it for the cloud. So for example, you might have like a big monolithic application and you want to break it into microservices, make it serverless, or change it so it can fully utilize like scalability and performance things services in Azure. This strategy is more resource intensive for sure. It requires some time to prepare and execute, but you will have all the benefits of that cloud can offer. And from my experience, this is like a very important step for applications that require like agility, performance, scalability that cloud natively offers to us, but the current architecture cannot deliver or cannot utilize those functionalities. Another migration strategy that we have here is called rebuild. This essentially means that we are rewriting our application from scratch to be optimized for using cloud native technologies. Obviously, this is not something that you can do quickly during your during your migration, but it requires a lot of time. And finally, we have option to replace existing application. This is usually for the third-party applications, not those that we built in-house, where vendor is telling us it's not supported to migrate the way we want it, or something like that. And this is often referred as repurchase, because what we will do is that we will look around and find a different application that will fit our purpose. And we will obviously look for something that is software as a service, or something hosted by a vendor, or something that can be natively deployed in our Azure environment. So we start utilizing that reduced management overhead immediately. And during these migrations, we often discover legacy applications that are like not being used anymore. And so we get rid of these. So there is like we retire them or archive them. There is no purpose for them anymore. Now, when planning your migration to Azure, you have to make many decisions. It's a big decision-making process. And one of these is whether to migrate and then modernize, or to modernize while you are migrating. And each approach has its own set of advantages and things to consider, right? So choosing to migrate first typically involves lift and shift approach, where you move your existing applications to cloud as they are. This is ideal if you need to act quickly, or if you're looking to minimize like initial disruption and complexity. For example, I don't know, your data center contract is expiring and you have tight schedule, or there can be like budget related things or anything that needs to like make your migration happen quickly. If you have complex environment with hundreds of servers and applications, going into details of each application will take months, if not years of planning. So usually the simpler approach is to do a lift and shift, have it running in the cloud, and then optimize. And this is very important to understand that migration to Azure is not set it and forget it process. No, regardless of whether you choose to migrate first and modernize later, or modernize during the migration, you will always have to keep optimizing and modernizing your environment. That's how the cloud is. And continuous improvement is necessary. You create this improvement cycle, and that helps you stay efficient, that helps you stay secure, cost optimize. And I'm not just talking about like operational level where you need to take care of things, but also think about how you can replace something with something like platform or cloud native, and improve your workflow. And this optimization after migration really needs to be part of your long-term strategy. So now when we have that clear, in this session, I'm not going to dig deep into all the ways how we can optimize for cloud. That could be another week of talk, or maybe just another session. But one of the ways that I already mentioned when we talk about replatforming, is to move our existing architecture into services that already exist in the cloud. And these services are something that it's called platform as a service, or PaaS for short. And this provides us platform to run and manage our applications without the need to think about the complex infrastructure below. So we don't need to take care of hardware or operating system. Cloud provider is going to do all of that. And so our teams can focus on running applications, right? And as you can see here in this comparison, that our management overhead is much smaller for PaaS comparing to on-premises or IaaS. And now, on top of that, those platform services are usually globally available. They're easy to scale up and down based on our demand. They have many security features built in, and they follow all sorts of compliance protocols and standards that we don't have to worry about, and we don't have to set up those things. And so on top of all of that, they can also be very cost efficient, because typically we only pay for what we use. So there is no risk of over provisioning and underutilizing those resources. Microsoft Azure offers a whole lot of platform services that you can use, and like for different purposes based on our architecture requirements and application needs. So here is a simplified decision tree that you can take a look, but I'm not going into details here. The idea is that we want to make things simpler, more cost effective, and reduce some headache. So let's finally take a look at some services that are usually easy to optimize during the migration process, and they do not introduce the risk for outage or functionality issues afterwards. Also, first thing that I have to say is that the title of this talk is a big lie. Some of these services that I'm going to talk about are not actually platform services. They're technically Azure infrastructure services, or IaaS, because they belong to infrastructure that Azure is running on, and they were not mentioned in the previous slide. But sorry for that, but the goal is the same. Instead of using a specific hardware or application running inside of your operating system, we will use services or service that is already in Azure and that we don't have to fully manage by ourselves. So, the idea is that when we are considering things to migrate, and when we are performing migration from our on-premises data center to Azure Cloud, we can replace some of these services as easily as it would take to migrate them, the existing ones. So let's start with one of those IaaS services first. Backup and disaster recovery, right? Moving to Azure is a great chance to step up your disaster recovery and backup game. Using cloud makes it really easy to set up offsite backups and DR solutions that are way more robust than your old school tape backups and dedicated hardware solutions that you have within your data center. So if your current backup software plays nice with Azure, you can use that. And of course, you utilize Azure storage and vaults for replicating and storing your backups. Or you can look in the Azure marketplace to find something that does play nice with Azure. Or you just switch to Azure natives options like Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. Either way, you are getting a cloud optimized backup solution, and you can also make it multi-cloud if you want. Jumping up to the next one, this is not like an obvious thing, but again, public clouds like Azure basically give us access to unlimited resources. making it easy to scale up and keep things running smoothly, even under like heavy loads. And we did not have that functionality before, right? So we should, when we migrate those virtual machines, we should also take a look into using those capabilities to make them highly available across different regions. We can also make them closer to our customers and users because we can replicate them to the regions that are closer to users. And the best part is that we usually don't have to make changes like in infrastructure or how the application works to make that happen. This is like functionality of virtual machines. Next up, network segmentation. So looks like no-brainer. You are creating a different network, and when you're setting up your Azure, you get a chance to plan your network segmentation properly. Planning the network segmentation will go hand in hand with planning your subscription strategy, your landing zone, how everything interconnects. And this is like really essential for making your Azure environment scalable and secure. However, this might be like obvious in a larger infrastructure. In smaller environments, I see companies don't always go through this process, and they just start by creating a resource group and VNets, and they connect their on-premises environment. Okay, that's a good start, but the network segmentation and planning will become much more difficult later than if you do it properly in the beginning. I've seen this many times. Please do it. Do it in the beginning. And of course, if you have some like hundreds of subscriptions, then this is something you will have to deal with anyway. Next one, SQL cluster to platform as a service. I'm mentioning obviously there are different types of databases that will work with this, but I'm mentioning here specifically SQL cluster because it's not that difficult. Switching your SQL clusters over to Azure platform can save you a lot of like headache. Not only you get automatic high availability, you get lower maintenance. There are no more patching cycles over the weekends, and in generally, it will be cheaper than keeping up with your SQL enterprise license and always-on setups that you normally would set up. And you get all of those functionalities built in, so you don't have to worry about high availability and things like that. And the best part of this is that application vendors are usually able to confirm whether this method is supported or not. So in many cases, instead of migrating your SQL server, which you will probably not migrate anyway, you will have to create some stretch cluster and then fail over or something like that. But even like if you do that, in that case, you are migrating server. In here, you will just migrate your database instances from that server to SQL cluster. Sorry, not SQL cluster, to Azure SQL database, for example. And the application can still use it and do it. Optimizing VM size, I guess this is a no-brainer. During the migration assessment, we'll do our best to figure out our workloads, what our application need, and then optimize Azure VM sizes instead of like sizing it as it was on premises. I personally heard a lot of like bad talk about this because in on-premises you tend to optimize for performance, where in cloud you try to optimize for cost. I don't really agree with that wording because in cloud you still optimize for performance. But if your virtual machine needs those resources, you will give it to it, and if they are just overutilized, over-provisioned but underutilized, then you don't really need those, and then there is no difference then when it's running in on-premises environment. And plus, obviously, in Azure, you can have those auto-scaling capabilities. So if the virtual machine needs the resources it can get it. And obviously Azure has a bunch of different VM sizes and types, families. So picking the right size and family for your VMs can make a big difference in how well your application run and how much you end up paying for. So that's something that it should be definitely considered during the migration. However, it's never going to be 100%. So the only piece of advice I have here is that try to give it less and then scale up if needed, because that's generally more easy to scale up than to go and scale back down and reduce the size. Next one, storage services and file servers. Right. So in on-prem environment, we have a big storage, we have a big, we have like a whole architecture for our file services and for saving files. Part of this is being replaced because we don't have a central SAN storage anymore. Now with each virtual machine will have its own disk. So that part is going anyway. This category here is specifically for like file servers and DFS, like file sharing, and running that in Azure in like old-fashioned way can get really expensive, and like especially if you need like high availability and IOPS and stuff like that, and it's not very efficient. Azure file sharing solutions like what they're called, Azure File Shares and Premium File Shares are actually designed to work well in the cloud and to work well with your existing software. They are built in as a replacement of existing technologies. And so they will in general offer you better performance and easier management and better cost. Now, this is not always easy, and I'm not going to tell you do it like this anyway. Complex applications can have many mounted disk aliases, specific access rights that are hard to replicate and also hard to really understand for someone who is doing the migration. And so this can introduce like a lot of stress and complexity, and things can end up not working, and then you will have to troubleshoot and stuff like that. So again, this is one of the scenarios when you can migrate as is and then optimize later, bit by bit. But in some cases, like migration directly to Azure File Share or Premium File Shares makes a lot of sense. And migration process is actually easier than replicating the server. And also Azure offers some functionalities for like Azure, it's called Azure File Sync, and this like lets you keep some files in on-prem in sync with your on-premises servers. Next up, scripts running on scheduled tasks. This topic is near and dear to me. If you're running scripts or any kind of automation in Azure or in your virtual machine as a scheduled task, you are wasting a lot of resources. Especially if that's like dedicated virtual machine just to run your couple of your scripts, right? Azure services like Azure Functions and also Azure Automation accounts can handle script execution much more efficiently. And these tools are, again, highly available. They have built-in loggings and storing, and they tie nicely with other Azure services. They work with managed identities. They work with key vaults. So they, in general, making your life easier and potentially cutting down your cost. And sometimes this moving from like a, let's say, PowerShell script from running in a scheduled task to running in an automation account can be as simple as copy paste. So this is definitely something to consider as it will run in a proper way after it. The remote access. So with Azure, you might not even need it in traditional like VPN anymore. But if you do, and if you still have services that are only accessible over your private network, then you can use options like Azure Bastion or point-to-site VPN to secure access. Again, if you already have, for example, VPN service that is part of your firewall and you not end up using that, then it would be a big overhead to deploy that. When there is like point-to-site VPN that has a Windows client that has a integration with Entra ID, Azure Active Directory, and so on. So this can be an easy replacement. Another thing, if you are accessing your environment via jump boxes, you don't need to publish those through some firewall or somehow like publicly. They can be accessed with Azure Bastion. And another efficient way of giving your users, especially if you have like large amount of users that need to access your environment, then efficient way is to use Azure Virtual Desktop or Windows 365 and completely replace your jump boxes and VPN setup with this technology. Again, those are cloud services. They come with some cost. They might be more expensive than what you used to, but they are not that difficult, especially things like Windows 365 and point-to-site VPN. Those are easy to implement if needed. Active Directory Federation Services. So I had a lot of fun with that. But ditching your old ADFS setup for Entra ID single sign-on can really simplify your infrastructure and cut cost. It's not a difficult process, and it saves you a lot of maintenance, security, patching, and it's worth it. It works better with the remaining of your Microsoft ecosystem. That's all what I'm going to say. A couple more objects here. Update services, again, depending on the solution you are using, you can easily switch to, after moving to Azure, you can easily switch to Azure Update Management. That will also work for on-premises, Arc joint device servers, and you can use it to patch your Windows and Linux servers. Easily replace something like Vasus server. Just keep in mind that it won't handle updates for all OS types and won't provide all of these features like some other dedicated software that is just for updating on a scale. But if your environment is simple, or if you are considering to implement or move your existing Vasus server or something like that to Azure just to patch your couple of Windows or Windows and Linux servers, then think about using Azure Update Management from Automation Account instead. And finally, this is just to add it to the list, but management server, I know you all have your beloved management server from on-premises that you used for years and years, and you have all of your tools. You have like your SAN management tools, iDRAC plugins and Javas and switch management tools and things like that. You're not going to need that in Azure. So, and for Windows Admin Center, you can use a cloud version of Windows Admin Center that is available in Portal. You can also use Azure Auto Manage, and you can install those RSAT tools and then SSH agents on your client computer instead. So consider that. Consider ditching your old management server because you don't need that anymore. So that's pretty much it for today's session. It was about Azure migration strategies. We've gone through a bunch of Azure services and discussed how they can make your life easier during and after your migration. And remember, the key to successful migration is not just moving your stuff over. It's about making it work better than before. So thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions or need a deeper dive into any of specific areas, feel free to reach out and let's make your move to Azure a great success. Thank you.